we challenge the force, whether you're part of the 160th, the Rangers, Civil Affairs, PSYOPs, Special Forces groups, the enablers, anyone out there, to be threat informed on the current day threat.
People are the weapon system of USASOC.
But we can't be afraid of changing because we might get something wrong.
The forefathers of the United States Army Special Operations Forces jumped into occupied France starting the night before D-Day. Known as Jedburghs, their mission? Arm, train, and equip French resistance forces to conduct sabotage and subversion operations against a superior German force. These small three-man teams changed the course of the war, and they gave birth to the Green Berets. Today, Army Special Operations Forces are led by Lieutenant General John Braga, commander of the United States Army Special Operations Command. For this conversation, General Braga and I stormed the Utah Beach communication bunker responsible for the coordination of German defenses, and later, the facilitation of the largest amphibious assault in history. From this iconic setting, we unpack the significance of World War II on international norms. Norms that are still in play today, yet challenged at a level not seen since the pre-war era. General Braga shared his vision for Army Special Operations, is focused on threat-informed decision-making, and how Special Operations has evolved, but more importantly, where it needs to go, and why it's not there yet. He also explains how Special Operations are preparing for conflict with nation-states like China and Iran, while also ensuring terrorist organizations have no sanctuary across the globe. Finally, we talk integration, and why Special Operations is a critical node in the cyber and space fight deep behind enemy lines. Check out our conversation from underneath Utah Beach. Head over to our YouTube channel or your favorite podcast platform to catch all of our coverage from the 80th anniversary of D-Day. And don't forget to watch our first documentary, Unknown Heroes, Behind Enemy Lines at D-Day, the story of Operation Jedburgh, available now only on YouTube. General Braga, welcome to the bunker, the Roosevelt Cafe on Utah Beach.
It's awesome to be here, Fran. Thanks for having me, and this opportunity, especially in this location, pretty unique, pretty special.
Well, sources tell me that you're a student of history, and what I know.
Uh-oh, it was not a quiz.
Here's the quiz. So I figured, before we get this thing rolling and get going, that we should talk about where we are,
that's
and
awesome.
What we're doing and what this place actually is. And so I got, I'm gonna be the expert now, only because I learned this 10 minutes before you came in.
That counts.
You only know that because I just told you.
Yeah.
But this right here, this is actually the map of the communications networks. And here in the center, this is where we are. And so the Germans used this bunker to communicate with all of the other trench networks and personnel bunkers that lined Utah Beach.
That's impressive.
And when the Americans came across Utah Beach, they captured this fairly quickly, because this was one of the only structures out here. And they took the bunker, and then this became the node for the entire receipt of the rest of the forces that came across the beach for 6 months. They had planned for 2 weeks, then they had planned, then it kind of went on, and then it became 3 months, and then it became 6 months, because they ran everything out of here until they could get the port open.
That's amazing. So think about the significance of sitting here, of what decisions were made from hours into the invasion to, as you said, months. I didn't know that, so thanks for educating me on that. That is so cool. Love it.
I think the guy behind you was sitting here the whole time too.
He's waiting to be relieved.
But this is the spot. We've had the opportunity over the last couple of days being here on the ground in Normandy for the 80th anniversary and commemoration of D-Day. We sat down the other day with the USASOC Sergeant Major and Chief Warrant Officer, and we talked. We sat on the Resistance Monument, and just sat up on the wall and talked all about the regiment, specifically where's 1st Special Forces Command going. We had the opportunity to sit down previously with General Ferguson, and we've sat down with General Beaupere and Sergeant Major Strong. We sat down with Chief Ostrander at SWIC. We've run the gamut on the command.
That's
and
awesome.
Now I'm really fortunate and appreciate very much you taking the time out of a very busy schedule here to sit down with me, because we previously sat down with General Tovo a couple of years ago. Now he's the chairman of Green Beret Foundation, as a program of Green Beret Foundation. All things USASOC are near and dear to our heart, and now we got to hear it from the boss.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you for what you're doing, just getting the message out, and I'm glad you get to interview all those people, and each one has a unique story to tell. So I know it's awesome for the listeners to hear, whether it's General Beaupere's familial relationship to hear with his grandmother being here, while Normandy was being assaulted, to all the different walks of life that came here. Each one is fascinating. So thanks for just telling the story.
It's been an honor, truly. It's one of the, lack of a better word, it's one of the coolest things I think I've done in a very long time, if ever. But on General Beaupert's point, I got to say this 1 second. So he is featured prominently along with everybody else in our D-Day special, Unknown Heroes Behind Enemy Lines at D-Day, the story of Operation Jedburgh, and we dropped it the other day. So it was on 200 TV stations across the country. Awesome. It's on AFN, and it's on YouTube and streaming platforms. And so we're super excited to get that story out. It's like 21 minutes long. But we do the whole interview with General Beaupert about the Jedburghs before we got into talking about SWIC 2030 and everything. And I say, all right, sir, Sergeant Major, we're going to transition the conversation now. We're going to talk about SWIC 2030. And he says, I got one more thing. I just got one thing I want to say about the Jedburghs. I said, okay, well, go ahead. My grandmother was there. And the Sergeant Major and I look at the whole room, the camera guys, the audio guy, that everyone's like, what? Yeah. You just throw that out there, right?
Yeah. It's amazing. It's amazing. And I didn't know about that till a short time ago about Will, but absolutely inspirational there, and such a connection. We've talked about that, through the week, and you see the World War II vets, but it's amazing to think the familial and generational ties to that run throughout the formation. It's always something that's amazing to me to hear those people's stories.
Well, I asked everybody else, so I got to ask you, because we're here, and it is the 80th anniversary of D-Day, and we talk about the Jedburghs, and we talk about putting those teams together, but really about the lineage that has come from Operation Jedburgh, the fact that those American Jedburghs went on, formed the operations directorate of the CIA, and then were lifted out later on and became USASOC.
Yep.
Talk for a minute about the importance of Operation Jedburgh, what it meant, not only back in World War II, starting June 5th, the night of June 5th, 1944, but what it means to the organization and to USASOC today.
Yeah, well, I'd start with inspirational. I mean, that's what I think of. I mean, you think of the courage and valor of these individuals who've just, first of all, volunteered to that sounds like a mission I'd be willing to do, right? Think about just that bravery right there of I'll just jump in behind enemy lines or work behind enemy lines with my allies and partners in a small team. And at that time, no book you pull out. Remember when we used to do this? And let me talk to the forefathers who did this before. I mean, this was uncharted territory. So it's just inspirational when you're talking about that. When I read about them every time, I've had the honor and privilege, just 2 years ago to preside over Major General retired John Jack Singlob's funeral, the last remaining Jedburgh alive, which was just an honor for me, a professional honor, a personal honor to hear someone I looked up to and only you read about, and then you get to meet familial members in some cases, like here this week, meet actual living World War II veterans. I mean, these are the pillars, the historical pillars that I looked up to growing up, with starting in World War II and then through the Korean War and Vietnam War and on of that's when I talk inspirational. It's inspirational to me personally and professionally. I was like, man, if I only could be half the man or half the soldier of some of these people and what they did. And the scale of their impact is something else I think is inspirational. When you talk about small teams, which I think is still prevalent to this day, of SOF's value proposition with outsized impact. Whether you're talking about temporal dominance in the domains or, Admiral McRaven's book where SOF, maintains relevancy and dominance over a certain period of time and does something else. But here we have the Jedburghs with small teams having complete outsized impact. I think that runs through our lineage and our legacy to the present day. So I can't get enough of it. I try to read much as I can. I'm not an official historian. I know you had Troy on the other day.
We kidnapped him
yesterday. He's amazing.
There's no other word for it.
I want to brag about Troy for a minute. So last year, we stayed at a manor right up the road from Omaha, and only because we were doing staff rides and he pulled out the terrain maps did he figure out that the limit of advance day one was that actual manor. And then he went on the website and found the lieutenant's name, who was the platoon leader that day. and then he got in contact with his son, and then got his diaries, and then figured out not only was that the limited advance, we pulled up a picture of him. He was wearing a German, basically junior ROTC uniform, U.S. lieutenant. It's like, what the heck is this? 1936, he was a German exchange student, right? Wow. Spoke fluent German that he used that day when one of his guys got shot at the limited advance of day one to yell at the Germans to not shoot, that he was going to pull him back from that position. Troy Sackerty figured out last year. If you figure this is probably the most historically covered piece of ground in all of Europe, as far as from military historian after military historian, he figured that out. And then he figured out that was also where the Rangers met up there as they were coming up the beach, and then made up to their actually Ranger objective to reinforce Point Duhok came through that same manner that day. He figured that out last year. I mean, that's like, Indiana Jones, Raiders of the Lost Ark. You think of the problem. We couldn't be prouder of him being the USASOC historian. If you want to know anything about, check out his website that he runs and his heart and soul he puts into it. And he's a proud member of the team. So I'm glad you got him for 3 hours yesterday. Oh, yeah. He's much smarter on this than I am.
Well, that's a story that we're going to tell with him.
Awesome.
So I got to tell you that. And we leveraged his website extensively for the making of the documentary too, and he's been a great asset, and really the whole command has. But you can ask him anything, and he was pointing at vehicles and was like, "Oh, that's this vehicle. Oh, that's this vehicle." What we did get to do with him yesterday, though, is there was the cockpit of a C-47 was just on a trailer driving down the road, but it was bumper to bumper traffic. Yeah. So I hopped up on the trailer. And I said, "Hey, can we hop in here and get a picture?"
Yeah.
And he's kind of looking at me, and I said, No, Troy, come on. And we get in the airplane, and he looks at me. He said, "I've never been in the cockpit of a C-47. No, this is my favorite airplane ever."
How about that?
So that made me feel really good that we may have kept him much longer than he had planned, but we got to give him something that he hadn't had before. But yeah, we were so impressed with him.
Isn't it amazing though when you come here and you see all the, I don't know if the correct term is reenactors or enthusiasts or people who are spending their own resources to, I mean, you're seeing working Sherman tanks drive down the road and hundreds of Willys Jeeps and half tracks and C-47s. I mean, this is not government funded. This is, it's very patriotic. If you have not been to Normandy during the anniversary, it is a life moment for all your listeners out there. You got to get there. You got to get here. And you got to check it out. The patriotism here is inspirational too.
I agree. And I was saying yesterday, like, what do you do with your tank? Like the other 51 weeks a year? Like, where does that go? Hey, honey, my tank's in the garage.
I don't have that problem, but it is pretty good.
When we talk about the Jedburghs, when we talk about irregular warfare, unconventional warfare, these small man teams, small person teams who get out there and have these strategic impacts at a tactical level. That's the mission of SOF. Mm-hmm. When we think about the Special Forces Regiment, psychological operations, civil affairs operations, that's really what we're talking about. And we're going to start there, and then we're going to get into Range Battalion. We're going to get into 160th and their very specific mission, also critical to our national security strategy. Yeah. But to me, I think about this pendulum that we live in our national security strategy, which is often a byproduct of the times that we live in. And we go back to our history 80 years ago, and we had this focus on these small teams, irregular warfare, unconventional warfare, that persisted for a while. And then we spent a lot of time in the global war on terror, where our focus was really counterterrorism, counterinsurgency, and to some extent, like you talked about having to write the book back in 80 years ago, we had to almost write a lot of the book when it came to specifically counterinsurgency, a little more than counterterrorism, but we learned a lot as an organization through the global war on terror. And now we see that pendulum shift back. What's the focus right now for USASOC when we look at unconventional warfare, regular warfare, and the shift away from, I'll call it persistent counterterrorism and counterinsurgency?
Yeah, great question. A lot to unpack there. And I would say first, we do have distinct and different tribes and organizations underneath the USASOC, the Army Special Operations Command umbrella. But the most umbrella term that I think we wrap our arms around is irregular warfare, because everything kind of fits underneath it, from unconventional warfare to direct action to CT to anything we're doing as far as when we talk about core competencies and missions and roles there. But I agree with you. What runs through some of the stuff we've been called to do in present day challenges, the national defense strategy, is to have that same kind of going back to our roots of our foundation of some of the things that the Jedburghs and other did, small teams, outsized impact. We challenge the force, whether you're part of the 160th, the Rangers, Civil Affairs, PSYOPs, Special Forces groups, the enablers, anyone out there, to be threat informed on the current day threat, which is pretty domineering and threat out there, but to be strategically driven in everything you do. We don't need soft to being duplicative of our conventional armed brothers or the joint forces. Someone else is doing it, we can move on to something else. Because when you really pull apart the definition of a regular warfare, it talks about assuring and coercing, relevant populations. You try and change behavior. Mm-hmm. And hopefully soft is having that impact across the spectrum of conflict. That's competition, crisis, and conflict. And a crisis might be counterterrorism. It might be a neo-evacuation. It might be a flare-up. It would involve some light combat, and competition might be left to that. But what your role is needs to always come back to what's the strategic purpose and strategic outcome that you're trying to contribute towards. So you could be working in South America or Africa and contributing towards our NDS priorities of today, being counter PRC and Russia, namely the top two there. So I ask people to challenge themselves. What is your strategic impact? Again, no matter where you are and what you're doing, how are you contributing towards ultimately preventing World War III? Mm-hmm. That's what winning looks like. So that's what we're trying to do, is stay in that competition zone, maybe up to the crisis zone, and avoid the high-end conflict. But be sure, if there is high-end conflict, USASOC, Army SOF, Army Special Operations is absolutely going to have a role, no matter what part of the formation you're part of. It's what we're training to do. And it's a little bit of what we originated to do, before, I would say, the last 20 years of counterterrorism and the rest. Sometimes I talk to different groups and have to remind them, we weren't created for counterterrorism. It's something we do, mm-hmm. but it wasn't why we were created, really, the whole force. None of the force was created for counterterrorism. It's something we've done the last 20 years and need to do for the defense of the homeland. Mm-hmm. But we have other areas we have to invest in now. But regular warfare, start with being threat-informed and strategically driven in everything you do. And then, like you said, some of it is dusting off the old playbook, and some of it is uncharted territory of new technology, new challenges, new domains, new opportunities, and where do you fit in there? And that's the journey we're on right now.
How do you stay threat-informed? Mm-hmm. How do we do that across the force?
Great question. Part of it is, some of it is highly classified, and, just from the simple things, get more read-ons so that people know. But usually when I'm talking to a group, it could be a group of civilians who come by for our CAPEX or something like that. And a lot of the stuff you can find in open press of the threats, whether it's the PRC's 3 forms of warfare or cognitive warfare or the different techniques that they're trying to take advantage of our free and open society and asymmetrically take advantage of them. You can actually get pretty educated in the unclassed world to realize the threat may not always be wearing camouflage uniform and seeking to fight you on the plains of the battlefield. And I think SOF is tailor-made for that, whether it's going back to Wild Bill Donovan asking for skullduggery and different thoughts. I think the mindset of SOF is tailor-made to think creatively and be value-added to the challenges that we're facing right now, because it's not always direct. Mm-hmm. It's many times indirect and many times asymmetric, which I think is perfect for SOF and Army SOF to provide value in.
So one of the questions that I had asked General Beaurepaire was, why is SOF the proponent for psychological warfare operations? Mm-hmm. And one of the things that you talk about a lot is that part of psychological operations is informational. Yeah. How do we educate people? How do we get them to understand that there is a threat out there? Yeah. That China is a threat, Iran remains a threat. When we look at the psychological operations capabilities of our adversaries, and really how we also think about it, there's so many levers we can pull with social media, with the media, it's the traditional media, broadcast media. How are we preparing our psychological operations forces and teams to advance and to modernize and think about, hey, we used to do leaflet drops, but the leaflet now is the scroll on Instagram.
Absolutely. Well, I used to say, we perfected a lot of things in the last 20 years of the global war on terrorism, counterterrorism. Some of that was the F3A cycle, find, fix, finish, exploit, analyze. Some of it was ops intelligence fusion, network analysis, network defeat. And I used to ask everyone, hey, everyone here needs to be an intelligence officer. Like you need to read intelligence, produce intelligence, consume intelligence, understand where intelligence comes from in order to be effective in the counterterrorism fight. And information was part of that as well. Now I'm challenging everyone, like, you need to be an information officer. You might not be the expert PsyOps officer, but you need to care about it and have it part and parcel to every part of your plan for us to be effective. That's certainly what the adversary is doing, and they're investing in that. They think it's critically important. I think it's critically important. Perhaps it's the most important. You go back to the definition of irregular warfare, and if you're staying in whether it's the competition phase, you're trying to influence behavior, trying to assure and deter. But even if you're in high-end conflict, ultimately you're trying to stop a military, a government, a nation, a terrorist network, a different network to stop what they're doing. You're trying to influence behavior. And if you're going after that journey and not including influence in the information sphere, you're going to lose. Mm-hmm. So, we need to invest more, like we are, with with CyWar and irregular warfare efforts that Special Warfare Center is doing with the academy and the proponency that we've had for a couple of years now on behalf of the United States Army. So it needs to be from institutional and doctrinal level, but it needs to get down to the tactical level too. You have a huge impact here. You look at Ukraine. There's been over 17,000 deserters, Russian deserters from the front lines. So when you compare that to the great heroic work of the Ghost Army of World War II and Patton's fake army and all the efforts they did just recently this year, given the Congressional Gold Medal there for all their heroic actions they did here of tying up German resources. Same efforts happening in Ukraine and elsewhere right now. Your modern day psychological operations forces are having impact. Not always, we can't always tell their story, but you're absolutely correct. They're embracing the tools of technology and the speed of information, of which you're in that domain as well, and it needs to be part of every part of every operation. If not, you're not going to meet your ultimate objective.
The PsyWar school and the irregular warfare school is fascinating to me. It's interesting because when you go back to 1952, the Special Warfare Center and School started as a psychological warfare school.
That's right.
What's your vision as you look at SWIC and you look at the commander and the sergeant major there, and you say, we've been charged with this. This is what I expect to see from it.
Yeah, well, it is. It's a monumental task for sure, but we're doing everything from the schoolhouse as well as the tactical and operational formation. So on the schoolhouse side, obviously we're standing up the PsyWar proponency in school and all that to influence not only hopefully the USASOC formation, but even the efforts from the United States Army and the United States military. I think you're aware we've had Marine Corps guest instructors there for some time as the Marine Corps sends their personnel through the school. We've even had recently in the past year Naval Special Warfare officers start to come through the PsyWar school there. We see that as a growth opportunity and a critical one when you're talking about the challenges of today. So investments there's investments across the force, whether you're talking about some of the technical capabilities. We're breaking down new barriers every day, whether it's authorities and approvals, because sometimes in the past it can be threatening to some of different organizations, different agencies, different communities of their equities, which is realistic. It has to be balanced, but you have to be active in the information environment, or you're going to lose. You can't react. And to me, it's the first who sets the narrative has the advantage, and then you can iterate off that. So we have to change a mindset there. We have to, I think, teach up and out to make sure that how critical it is. We have to be active in the information environment. So we have to educate better people our capabilities across all the information-related capabilities, which is not just leaflets, even though we still use them. Loudspeakers, we still use them, but certainly social media has changed the game, and the reach of the world has changed the game.
One of the terms that you've used when we've talked about the direction of the force has been this idea of cognitive warfare. Well, I key on the term cognitive there, because in order to execute everything you're talking about, you just need smart people. You need good people, because the other thing that you've said a lot is that people are the weapon system of USASOC. That's 100%. Our greatest investment.
Yeah.
I mean, we look at the soft truths. It permeates across all 5 of them. It's all about the people. When you look at the transformation, and we hear a lot about Army transformation of not only the Special Forces Regiment and the Special Operations community, but the conventional Army. Mm-hmm. How are you focusing on assessment, selection, recruiting to ensure that we continue to get those cognitive thought leaders who can get out on the battlefield, where the battlefield might be a nasty place, but the battlefield has also evolved where we need very, very smart people who can make decisions in real time based on technology that doesn't really look like this anymore.
Yeah. We full-throated effort on that, from the operational force to the institutional force to the SORB, you name it, of bringing in the best and brightest, because we need all walks of life. And we're trying to attract all walks of life, whether it's psychological operations or the technologically aligned and impassioned young high schoolers out there, or even already in the workforce out there. We need them. We need them as part of the force right there, which is why we're making some pretty big changes, from everything from looking at the soft unit of action at the tactical level to where we're converging effects across all 5 domains with space and cyber. You mentioned and touched upon the human dimension, the Army's doctrinal term. I'd like to see that as a domain to be taken a little bit more seriously for working together, of having that focus area. But we're also actually trying to create new specialties. So we're standing up a tech innovator and a tech integrator warrant officer position in the schoolhouse at the Special Warfare Center and School. If you haven't paid attention at all to the battle in Ukraine or the Karabakh War before that innovation cycle, we used to talk about the F3A cycle. I really think it's the adaptation of new ideas and thought, the adaptation cycle, the innovation cycle, who's going to win really the current war and the next war, who can adapt the fastest, who can innovate the fastest. So innovate the idea, adapt the formation, whether it's a thing, a technique, a procedure, employ it, learn from it, and turn that tighter and tighter on the innovation cycle. But we can't leave that up for chance. We need experts. This is not additional duty. Whether you're talking about the employment integration of robots and drones or the modern use of technology for psychological operations, it can't be left up for chance. It confused me back in the day when I was still on a team that anything with electricity just went to the commo guy. Hey, it's got a battery.
It's true.
It's got a battery. Give it to the commo guy. Like, what? Yeah, even, believe it or not, even his computers were coming into the team room. Like, goes the commo guy. I'm like, isn't he supposed to be making comms? And then a TTL device, a camera. Hey, it's going to the commo guy. I'm like, man, he's got a heavy rucksack, and not only in time and weight, but mental space there. So boy, I firmly believe we've got to be better than that. We got to actually not only provide the space, but the career model too for people. Like, we have great people who are 3D manufacturers, printing, building their own drones, jailbreaking them, reprogramming them, designing, claws on drones, the first-person view drones. They need a career field where they're not going to be tapped out and capped out. We need to embrace that, and then that needs to be turned on the recruiting side. Every STEM robotics club in high school America needs to know they have a home. We have a home for them in Army Special Operations Force. You want to come be a badass drone builder, a badass coder, badass 3D printer? We got a home for you. You're going to work with the best. Mm-hmm. You work with the best. Now, some of that might be with a unit of action where you got to be in shape and you got to travel with the team. And some of it might be, you might be in a bunker like this, a modern day bunker like this, maybe with air conditioning.
But dehumidifier.
But as long as they're out designing the adversary to help that innovation cycle, we need those people too. And then many people, if you just flip it over to civil affairs or you flip it over to psychological operations, many people don't know. We've got anthropologists in civil affairs. We've got web designers and artists in psychological operations. I mean, every walk of life, if you're in high school America now, you probably didn't know you could have a career in Army Special Operations Force. So you probably had this mindset, it's only the middle linebacker or the captain of the football team we're looking for. No, we've got a home for you in every walk of life, and you'll be a value-added member of this team, empowered, resourced properly, and then given a sense of purpose. We've got nothing but opportunities with purpose and mission out there across the world, and hopefully that's what's going to attract the best and brightest, because we need them.
Yeah, I mean, as you're talking, I can't help but think back to those Jedburgh teams who were, mechanics and carpenters and, authors and came from all walks, farmers, teachers. And that's what's great about the SOF community, the special operations community, is that when you come into the community, it's not like you didn't have a past experience that you're now going to apply to your current role, because that's what they're looking for.
Exactly. That's the diversity. That diversity brings strength, diversity of thought, diversity of upbringing, diversity of your experiences. Huge force multiplier out there, especially when you're talking about operating in small teams. Yeah. Do you have something else you can rely upon other than just, here's what we taught you? Because we're not going to be able to teach you everything.
Right.
And that's why when you get back to assessment selection, you're looking for those intangibles and characteristics that don't change.
Yeah. Do you think there's a change to, I'll say specifically, the ODA and the most tactical unit of action? We've operated as 12-man teams. Yes, we assign augmentation and enablers at times, but that MTO has pretty much been the same for quite a long time. Do you foresee a change in that, or do you think that these additional capabilities you're talking about become enablers that get attached?
Yeah, I think we have to change. Usually when we start that conversation, when I'm asking people kind of blue skies, open thought of like, what do you want the soft unit of action? Don't even call it an ODA right now.
Yeah.
What do you want the soft unit of action to be, and what capabilities do you want as whether it's the next evolution of fighting in Ukraine, the possible fighting any other in the Indo-Pacific theater, elsewhere? What skills and attributes and capabilities would you want on a team? And we should drive for that. We got to get the books right, the force design right, or close to being right, and that takes some time when you're talking about how FM and force modernization works in the Army and in the military and in the SOCOM enterprise. It takes time to change those things. So I don't want to be the one who has, volume 2 of America's First Battles if we weren't prepared. Mm-hmm. We didn't prepare fast enough. So should that come for the next great war, did you do enough to be ready for it? And that's why I keep asking challenging questions about that. And usually when I go to the ODA, and Troy's much more versed than I am, but the original ODA wasn't 12-man. It wasn't. It started off at 15. And it was a 13-man, it was a 14-man. Even you look at some of the concepts originally based off the ops groups and elsewhere, and Aaron Bank and others wanted larger. I mean, so there's a lot of people hold on to the magical, mythical 12, but we didn't start off with 12. So yes, I would want, and I do want, more capability, different capability at the team level. Now, having more capability and perhaps having a larger number to start with doesn't mean I envision larger icons on the battlefield, because I think size and digital footprint can be pretty dangerous in the modern day battlefield. So kind of hearkening back to the Jedburghs who operated with small teams, it's what capabilities you'd want in those small teams. So that's everything we're experimenting with right now. So we've experimented with the size of the ODA already. We've experimented with where we're going to converge at. This is happening at the CTCs. This is happening in the operational force. They're all part of this experimentation right now. But I think we have to modernize, we have to change, or I think we'll be behind the adversaries.
Let's talk about the modern battlefield, the next battlefield.
Yeah. One
of the, I think, most impactful things I take away from the trip here to Normandy is D-Day, June 6, 1944, in so many ways set the world order for till today, till modern times, And what I mean by that is that the United States had a whole of society effort. Mm-hmm. The Allies, I think we need to be broader than the United States. The Allies had an entire whole of society effort that went into World War II. And one of the things that I think that you have to imagine when you stand on these beaches is if you stand on high ground and take yourself back to 6 a.m. on June 6, 1944, there were ships as far as the eye could see.
Right.
And that took years of industry saying, we're not making cars, we're making trucks. I mean, you talked about the trucks, we're watching the trucks that were made by Ford and Chrysler, and they made weapons and they made radios, and they didn't make clothes for people at home, they made uniforms.
Yep.
And the whole society mobilized for years to culminate on this one day to change the world and set the world order and let everybody know, hey, when America means business, no one can stop us.
Yeah.
And that held. for a very, very long time. But today, in so many ways, we're challenged like we've never been for a very long time. And we can talk about the Cold War and get into that. And certainly that the nuclear arms race was a different challenge, and we faced that one. But today we face adversaries that are multidimensional. They're leveraging different domains to get to us, whether it be the psychological operations, information warfare, standard arms, conventional warfare. We're in whether we want to believe it or not, we're in a naval capabilities race with China. We're in a space race. They just landed on the far side of the moon. And if you listen to the NASA director, why do we want to go to the far side of the moon? Because we got to get to the South Pole first, because that's how you get to everywhere else. So we're in this fight with multiple adversaries. When you look forward and you assess the next fight, you talked about prevention of the peer-to-peer fight.
Yep.
What do you see out there in the world, and what's your top priority?
Yeah, great question. I'll start with the past and go maybe foreshadow to the future of going back to what's old is new, of that industrial base that really the might of the Western world, which really, I think, really helped be the biggest catalyst for winning here, above and beyond the individual sacrifice there. I mean, that took time for America to get ready for that. So I know when Wild Bill Donovan went back to brief FDR after visiting, kind of doing his own reconnaissance out here, he told him, hey, we need to run a Bush League game, and we need to kill the umpire and steal the ball and run out the clock. We had to buy time for that industrial base and the raising for Marshall to actually grow the United States Army to have the depth needed for successfully invasion, and then continuing on to the ultimate objective here of destroying the Nazi war machine there and ending the war there.
Troy gave me the numbers.
Did he?
He gave me the numbers. I didn't know this till yesterday. 1939, there were 130. I don't remember if he said 130 or 150. There were 130 or 150,000 people in the United States Army.
Yeah.
By 1944, there were 9 million.
Yeah. There was, there's so many good things to read about that. When you talk about the industrial base, you got Freedom's Forge, great book that talks about just, retooling the automobile industry and the shipbuilding industry and all that. But a fair question is, do we have that type of time? And when you talk about the size of the Army and size of the military, it's quite small. It's smaller than the invasion force that was invading Kuwait in 1990 to repel Iraq there. I mean, they were pretty tiny. We talk into the size of a 300 million plus country. So we're going to have to be prepared to take every advantage we can with the current size of our military to make sure we have dominance across all those domains. So to the newest domains, you look at the Special Forces patch, the 3 lightning bolts on it, air, sea, and land. For the domains that existed when we stood up, well, there's 2 more, cyber and space. And I don't think we had moved fast enough and aggressive enough, which is why we've been very aggressive in growth in those 2 domains. That I think SOF has a value proposition there as we work with our space and our cyber partners, which is why I do talk a little bit about our soft space cyber triad and a modern day triad and the tools of a modern day triad in support of the larger strategic nuclear triad. But the tools of modern day kind of influence is revolving around what soft can do and what cyber can do and what space can do. And it's really part and parcel and critical to modern day C5 ISRT. And I think soft has a role in both enhancing, disrupting, degrading, and supporting the Army and the Joint Force and some of that dominance in those other domains to provide other entities in the Joint Force to provide their capabilities. Again, going back to SOF has a unique role to play, contributing back to the Army and the Joint Force. So I'm excited about it. I'm excited about where we're at right now because it is uncharted territory. I don't think anyone joined SOF to be told exactly what to do. Here's step 1, 2, and 3, do this. You're probably looking for something different. You definitely, I think people most come and most people most stay statistically for purpose. And I think we provide nothing but purpose there when you're talking about here is a very ambiguous, wide left and right limits of how you can contribute towards being strategically driven in these new domains against these adversaries, which again might not be wearing a camouflage uniform. I'm glad you said whole of society. whole of nation, not whole of military, and not whole of government, whole of society, what's going to be needed to win in this conflict, whether it stays in the competition phase or it goes to high-end conflict. The only way to win is a whole of nation and whole of society approach.
Yeah. I mean, I think that's one of the hardest parts for me when you look back on like something like the global war on terror, and you kind of think, well, the military was at war.
Yeah.
Was the nation at war?
Yeah.
We could argue that.
Lots of lessons learned there. Yeah. Great support from the American people. It's almost, embarrassing. You get thanked for your service walking through an airport or wherever like that, or wherever you're at an establishment. I mean, like I absolutely love what I do. Still passionate about what I do. I love coming to work, love being on a team and working on missions of consequence and working with people who want to strive to push themselves to be better who they are. But the thanking thing is always, it's always a weird feeling. What do you say? What's the right thing to say? I love passing on. One of our 3 current Medal of Honor winners, but Sergeant Major Matt Williams, he's one of our 3, which is incredible itself. 3 active Medal of Honor winners and soon to be 2 more added here this month. In the active force, that's those type of people. I'm inspired. You talk about the lineage and the inspirational people from World War II. They're walking the halls right now of your Army Special Operations Forces that you get to work with every day. But what he said when at a speaking engagement, when he asked, and hey, thanks for your service, and he didn't know what to say, and he came back with just be a citizen worth serving for. Because he asked, how can I repay you? I'm like, I don't need repayment. I do what I do because I love what I do here. But just be a citizen worth serving for. And I think that really weighs heavily on me of how powerful that comment is there. And when you think about it, whether it's in or out of uniform or just your daily interact with people, or just be a good person.
Yeah.
The world can use more of that, Yeah, I don't know if that answers your question.
No, that's it, and that's great. I hadn't heard that from Matt. Actually, plug for episode 140, which has Matt.
All right.
So it hasn't even come out yet.
All right.
Well, it's
all right.
little known. As of this recording, it hasn't come out yet, but it's coming up soon. How do you combat an enemy that doesn't value life? Because we as a Western society, and especially in America, value life. And we talked about people, the important. We put our people above everything. But when we look at some of our adversaries, they don't necessarily value life like we do. So how do we prepare for that conflict, and how do we think about that?
That's a great question. I would say even if you take the 20 plus years of the war on terrorism, never has so much been done in a very highly kinetic fight many times, and some of it very conventional, has been done to protect innocent human lives. But whether it's the destruction of the ISIS caliphate in Syria, which was very much conventionally forward line of troops and multiple obstacle belts and reattacks, and it wasn't just terrorism operations, but extreme patience and extreme investment on avoiding innocent lives and civilian casualties when you talk about human shields and the rest of it. You see some of that playing out in the information sphere in the Israeli-Gaza conflict right now, of how important that is to our society, and I think the world society. It's just something that in the long game, I think is respected in the eyes of the global population, how we do respect human rights and values out there. But I do think when you think about World War II and large conventional warfare, there's no doubt about it. It's a different scale than any of us have seen in my lifetime. And when you have adversaries who do not, it just doesn't even enter their calculus. It's hopefully it can be turned on its head a little bit of influencing those to not go to great war. I mean, you look what's going on in Ukraine. It is, here we are in this bunker. Everyone thought that would have been the last war on the European continent for our lifetime. Yeah. But here we are, the largest ground conflict since World War II going on right now in Europe.
For land.
For land.
They're battling for land.
Yeah. So it's tough. It's tough when we think about, and we have to envision, we have to challenge ourselves when we think about, again, those new domains and new weapon systems that can be used against us, and how do we fit in, and what's our role to play, and still balance the, I really do look at it as a good versus evil.
Mm-hmm.
I absolutely look. There's the life of a soldier like yourself. You've seen it. You've seen it on the battlefields, and there's just evil in this world, and there's got to be good people to stop that. I really think it comes down to that, and that sometimes requires sacrificing even your own blood of what people have been willing to raise their right hand to support and defend the Constitution and really all the ideals it upholds around the world. Again, that gets back to what motivates me to come to work. That's what you're surrounded with, those people who are willing to do that. That's a great life to be surrounded by people like that who have that same passion and purpose.
And I think that's what separates us. I think that's what separates the American military from so many others who are out there. How do you assess the culture of the USASOC formation right now, as for a lot of intent and purposes, where we sit right now, we down ramped from a very, very high operational tempo, and we have an entire portion, the GWAT generation, my peer group, that 01, 02, 03 peer group who saw 9/11, came in. Well, I went to a retirement ceremony for a guy I came in the Army with, and we shared a bunk at Reception Battalion, and he retired a couple months ago.
Yeah.
So you have this entire portion of the formation who's retiring. The guys who were our mentors, like my team sergeant, when I showed up and he said, "How long have you been in the Army?" And I'm like, "Oh, I don't know, 3-4 years or so." And he's like, "Okay, well, I've been on this team for 14." And you're like, "Okay, I'll be quiet for a little bit here and learn from you." But those guys understood pre-global war on terror. They're retired. This generation's retiring. There's a younger group who's now coming in. How do you assess the culture as you look forward to the next fight?
Yeah, I think the culture is strong. Again, going back to, I think people are our platform, and we attract good people, and our multiple different assessment selection processes bring in the best of the best, and we're fortunate that way. We're absolutely fortunate to have the best people, but I think we're strong, and mainly I think our strongest value proposition out there, whether it's inside the United States military or globally, is I think we have the best NCOs in the world. I mean, we have the most competent, professional, non-commissioned officer corps, I believe, in the United States military. Professional warriors. Nothing to take against anyone else, but I'm just proud of and honored and trying to keep up with some of these people, whether it's the intellect or physically, always pushing ourselves. But I think that's why so many people are attracted to SOF. Like, I want to be surrounded by people who want to push themselves. And like we like to say, selection's an ongoing event. Don't care what you did 10 weeks ago, 10 days ago, 10 minutes ago. What are you doing for me right now, and how are you getting better, and how are you improving your foxhole? That culture breeds on itself.
Yeah.
And so I don't think we're at a historically new point. I think it's always been this way. There's always been, for me, there was MACV-SOG guys running around when I got there, and blue light guys and Sante Raiders, like, wow, look at these guys when they came in there. And then for my journey, pre-9/11, I don't ever remember coming to work pre-9/11 not being motivated, because that day we weren't shooting or blowing up something or killing a terrorist. Like, I don't remember that in my mindset. So it's a little bit foreign to me to think that someone would come and not be motivated. I get where people would be thinking. They parachuted into the first-person Call of Duty Modern Warfare game, and they think they missed their opportunity of but the 20 years of GWAT, every rotation, every location was different. I don't think it was the same, every fighting season, every whatever. Everyone has this belief that it was always this way or that way. I think every kind of rotation was a little bit different because the enemy was reacting. The different variations, everything was changing. The environment was changing. Everything was changing throughout there. So I don't think there's been this perfect moment. Even if you go back, again, World War II, so everyone looks at that as the quintessential black versus white, good versus evil, and there's a clear strategic goal, and end state is end state. But it wasn't too long after World War II ended that the strategic landscape had changed, and the Berlin airlift, and then you had what unfolded with Marshall going as Truman's representative with Chiang Kai-shek and the Civil War in China at the time. I mean, that was right on the cusp of World War II. Marshall retired for one day. went down to Southern Pines and was gardening, and he got a phone call from the president. He answered the phone and said, "Yes, sir, yes, sir, yes, sir." His wife's like, "What was that?" He's like, "Well, the president just asked me to go be the emissary there to go out to China at the time, like that." And then he had there's great books written about Marshall, and there's that chapter of his life, which was a very challenging time for that. On top of that, when he was on that job, he got called back for the Pearl Harbor Commission and had to testify as they were looking kind of for a scapegoat of sorts there. So I don't believe there was this just everything black and white, mythical, perfect end state. Because if you were a World War II vet, I imagine you like the world's upside down when you're thinking just a couple months to a couple years to a couple decades after World War II. But back to your first point, we've all been benefited. International world order was set by those great patriots that did sacrifice in World War II.
So we talked a lot about information. We talked a lot about understanding the operational environment, the capabilities that exist within the USASOC formation to do that. We talked a lot about Green Berets and the Special Forces mission. Let's talk about finding, fixing, and finishing the enemy, and the two units under your command that do that at, I'd say, the best level in the world, and that's the 75th Ranger Regiment and the 160th Special Operations Aviation Regiment. Talk for a minute about the strategic importance of those two organizations.
There's nothing else like it. Absolutely nothing else like it. And I wouldn't say the U.S. military, I'd say the world. Rangers obviously continue their lineage of the premier light infantry force with packing a wallop well outside their size and capability, and really being a great thought leader when you talk about those present day challenges and multi-domain operations. They're doing some fantastic experimentation in multi-domain operations right now. So it's not your grandfather's Rangers. The grit, the determination, the valor, everything that made a Ranger in World War II, that's still there. But now the tools are different, and it's amazing to see them continue to live out their Abrams Charter and help influence the rest of the Army and the Joint Force with some of the stuff they're doing. All the while heel to toe deployed since the beginning of the GWAT and 9/11 and never coming home, and still that way. So providing a unique value proposition there. I'm super proud of them. Unfortunately, we were hoping to scale the cliffs of Duhok tomorrow for the 275's change of command, which we'll partake in, but the cliffs are eroding, and it didn't pass the safety, the French safety standards. So I got poked by one of my friends, like, "Since when did you ask for permission to do any of that?" I was like, "Well, I'm not trying." He thought the old Rangers would be upset about us. And then the 160th, I like to say, I mean, they continue to make the extraordinary look ordinary. I don't think people get the world-class flyers that we have there that get us to and from the target. Is just it's amazingly, they've made it common the way they've been able to get us in and out of target, and the places they've landed, that I've gotten to personally experience and see the difference they've made that no other pilot could do in the world under conditions where they're being shot at or flying in between two buildings or on a roof. I mean, it's amazing, and it has not slowed down. They're more deployed now and more busy now than they were 2 years ago. Mm-hmm. It has not slowed down. You asked about that earlier. I mean, we've got 3,000 to 4,000 people deployed every day in 70 to 80 different countries. It hasn't slowed down for SOF, and it certainly hasn't slowed down for the Rangers or the 160th, on top of the rigorous training that is absolutely paramount to their ability to deliver their specialized effects on the battlefield. So they're unique and part of the crown jewels of all the formations that fall underneath us, providing their unique capability for the RSOF umbrella there.
Yeah, we had a chance to sit down with General Hutmacher a while ago and talk about his career, and then and really kind of the evolution of 160th. Yeah. I think we gotta try to set up a trip and go down there and do a piece down there. With
that would
them.
be great.
It would be cool, and then also do one with the 75th. I think would be pretty cool too.
Yeah. Both, I mean, we have so many great stories to tell, which I appreciate what you're doing with this podcast, because I don't think, and I'm guilty as charged, like I don't personally like telling stories or personal stories, and this is new for me as well. Great conversation about a month ago with Jimmy Spencer, Second Sergeant Major of MACV-SOG, that Second Sergeant Major of USASOC there, and he used to sign all of his letterhead with the quiet professionals, and he was just reflecting on that. It was like, well, maybe we've been the silent professionals, and we need to be a little bit better of telling our story and our value proposition, not out of bragging rights or anything like that. Part of it's education, information of what SOF can do for the larger Army and the Joint Force. I knew to do a better job of that. But even for the American public and elsewhere, as I'm trying to find that balance, how do you respectfully tell the stories of our great people and the great organizations without, one, being an OPSEC or an intelligence, concern for adversaries to glean from, or two, to just not live up in line with our values of our culture, if that makes sense. Yeah. So I appreciate your professional approach you've been doing of mining and harvesting these different ideas and stories and vignettes there and finding that balance. It's been great.
It's what I've always wanted to do. You talk about your passion, and you talk about like what drives you and motivates you. Before I made the decision to go chase these guys with beards and long hair, riding horses and saving the world in the post 9/11 days, I thought I want to be Tom Brokaw. Tom Brokaw, Dan Rather, Peter Jennings, and watch those guys every night. And I said, that's a standard. To me, like that was the standard of professional journalism. And can we get out there and try to tell those stories?
Yeah.
And, I think to your point, without pontificating, some nonsense, ideas and that live in the extremes.
Yeah.
And we don't have to tell, war stories about, when I was in the shit, we can, but we can tell the stories of the regiment. We can tell the stories of the organizations that make up USASOC and Special Operations Command in a way that educates and informs and really drives impact, because that's what we're trying to show is that, hey, this is what these folks are out there doing every day. And that's why, I guess, to quote Matt Williams, you get to be a model citizen that we get to do it for.
Yeah.
Because there's folks who are out there doing it.
Yeah.
So, what's your vision of USASOC for the next 5 or 10 years? Where's it going? What do you want it to look like?
Yeah, well, ready for the next fight should it come. I mean, that's what motivates me every day. Are we innovating, modernizing, transforming fast enough? Like I said, I don't want to be at the precipice of that battle and say, man, I wish I used our time more wisely. I wish we picked up the pace a little bit more. So perpetually motivated every day to say, are we moving fast enough to be ready for that? Are we being impactful enough in today's fight and competition, and then around the world for all the crises that, it's not a calm world right now. Yeah. Are we doing all of we need to at the pace we need to be ready for everything we're doing? And it's challenging when you balance current day requirements, current day training, and then, hey, we need to move the goalpost down a little bit here and have a vision that we're striving towards. And I've talked a little bit about that, but is it? Are we doing it aggressively enough? That's what kind of motivates me there. The vision, we talk about that open up a little bit about that of being threat informed. First, you got to understand the adversary. I remember when, first deployed to Afghanistan early on, 2002 and stuff. You had 2 books everyone probably read The Bear Over the Mountain, and you learned where all the places the Russians got ambushed, and then we got ambushed in the same places, There was another one, The Man Would Be King, not the Rudyard Kipling one, but a Uriah Harlan one about a Pennsylvania Quaker who invaded Afghanistan. You had a couple books you could read, and that it wasn't like it was like, hey, let's go take the Al-Qaeda course, let's go take the Afghanistan course. That gets into the profession of arms and the profession of soldiering, which is self-study as part of it. And it's on you to learn about the adversary. We're not going to spoon feed you everything because we don't know everything. Mm-hmm. So some of that is going to feed itself. So being threat informed and strategically driven is part institution, part organizational, part individual responsibility as well on that journey. And then, operationally focused and tactically prepared, good questions, shoot, move, and communicate. And what is the shoot, move, and communicate in a multi-domain operational world? What's different? We spend a lot of time talking because your most precious thing ends up being time and how you spend your time. And at the team sergeant level, what are you spending your time on? Are you really, really being hard on yourself? Are you doing what you need to do or what you like to do for that fight? And we have very robust and the culture is strong. There's no one agrees on everything in SOF, which is good. We have strong opinions, but everyone should be challenging the training calendar. Like, what are you training for? Like, what's the most important thing, the least important thing? I don't think you want that prescriptive from the top. So I try and ask those questions and put some goalposts out there, what I think we need to be working on and contributing back towards, whether it's, disrupting adversary C5 ISRT, or if it's providing modern day strategic reconnaissance, or perhaps in cases you are doing by, through, and with sabotage operations with allies and partners and surrogates and the like there. But we need to keep asking ourselves those hard questions and not resting on our laurels. And every day we should question it. We should live up to our culture and our ethos of having candor and asking hard questions. Was yesterday good enough for tomorrow? And we got to really just be ruthless and call each other's out, call balls and strikes on each other all the time. And as the culture is strong and the people are strong, we'll get the rest of it mostly right. We won't get everything right, but we can't be afraid of changing because we might get something wrong. That's I won't rest for that. We got to paint that vision. We got to drive towards it, and that's what we're trying to do. Underneath again that irregular warfare umbrella with asymmetric approaches. And I hope we find extreme value in everything we're doing. If someone else comes along and does it better or does it the same, good. We can move on to something else. We don't need to be duplicative. We can't afford it. Time-wise, resource-wise, is part of the joint force. So we should be providing a unique value proposition across that spectrum of conflict. And I think that's through irregular warfare is what we do.
Tagline of the podcast is how you prepare today determines success tomorrow.
Yeah.
Because nobody, like you said earlier, nobody cares what you did yesterday.
Yeah.
It's about what we do tomorrow. Test question.
Okay.
Last question. Test
Not
question.
off the map. Not going back to the map.
Yeah, I need you to reiterate how this bunker was used.
Magnetic north or true north? Declination angle.
You mentioned shoot, move, communicate a second ago, and I started smiling because habits are what form the foundation of great leaders, great organizations, and elite performers. I always think about the Jedburghs. I think about even our modern day forces who are out there, and the three things you have to be able to do at a high level every day are shoot, move, and communicate. Because if you can do those things with the utmost precision, just like when the Jedburghs parachuted into occupied France, they didn't need to think about how do I use my weapon, how do I navigate through terrain at night, how do I talk, how do I use my radio. They had a larger focus that they had to apply their mental capability to defeating the Germans. What are the three things that you do every day in your world to set the conditions for success?
Great question. Well, first, I think you got to grow yourself. As if you're not coming to work resilient, refreshed, and you give it your all, then you're just not going to make it through the marathon, the long term. You might burn out. You may do well for a short time, but if you're not taking care of yourself and growing yourself, I think that's whatever your resiliency comes from, whether it's your family, your faith, your whatever builds your internal resiliency you need to do. For me, that it's got to be, it's still a contact sport. You got to be physically fit. This is not it's just part of being a warrior. You got to be physically fit. I hope I'm a better husband, father, leader, soldier. Certainly not as fit as I used to be, but for my own mental health and mental resiliency, I got to do PT every day. I also try and grow professionally and find time to, I probably do way more podcasts and audiobooks than I do actual reading nowadays because just of time management. But I get a lot out of that, of reading back to historical vignettes and what others were challenged with in the past. And I draw a lot of strength from that and new ideas, old ideas, or the like. So I think grow yourself is something you got to do every day, whatever it could be anything. It could be music. It could be your religion. It could be your family. But that's it. And coming home and seeing my wife and kids on the days I do come home, that fills my resiliency tank there. It's not balance. A lot of people throw the word balance out. There's not 50-50. You're not going to be, I don't think that's a realistic thing to say balance. I think that's a civilian world thing. You were talking about you and your wife and your kids of like, I'm assuming it's not 50-50 on everything. No. I think that's a little rich, but I do think it's quality over quantity. So when you do have them, you can invest in that time. So my wife and two of our kids are here to enjoy this lifetime moment of Normandy. I think that's important. The second thing I say, what are you doing to grow others? I mean, there's plenty of great sayings out there, whether it's from the book Legacy of grow trees that you won't see, plant trees you'll never see grow. Mm-hmm. I mean, you can't do enough on talent management and grow in the next generation. And look what happened here on Normandy with the multitude of casualties and people stepped up. Are they ready to step up? You got to invest in them before it's time to step up. So you can probably spend the preponderance of my time there's everyday stuff, but the most important stuff is that talent management piece of it, whether it's investing in individually or organizationally. So again, what are you doing out there to invest in others, to make others better? And then collectively, it'll make a huge impact. So then grow yourself and then grow others. And then I think thirdly is just whether it's you're fortunate enough to be in long as I have and to reach a positional power, but it doesn't have to be. It could be the lowest power, but continue to ask yourself, how do you make a difference in other people's lives? Literally make a difference. If you make a difference in one person's life every day, I mean, think of the impact you have there. Yeah. And that could be helping someone out in time of need, a challenging situation, have nothing to do with work. Can you be there for them? Or it could be professionally investing in somebody to their, and you probably won't remember what email you're working on or what PowerPoint brief or what meeting you went to. But if you can make a difference in someone's life just a little bit, and it might be just letting them know you care and they're down on a rough day and you're a teammate and a buddy for them, that's a pretty cool opportunity. So when you're fortunate enough to be the head of a large organization and have the opportunity to make a couple first downs and a couple touch points and make a difference in someone's life, man, you got to use your power for good and your rank and your position, your experience and whatever you can. But that does mean because you're a general officer, you could be a team leader. You could be a Bravo junior that you can lead up to and lead laterally. And so you got to look for those opportunities. I talk about a lot about specified and implied tasks. That's one of those implied tasks. And you just help make other people's lives better. It'll pay back, tenfold. I promise you that. So
grow yourself, grow others, and make a difference in someone's life.
Yeah.
All right. You said first downs. So last question, Gerard Mayo and Drake May, they get more first downs than the last group or what?
Yeah. Yeah, I'm excited. I'm a lifelong Boston sports fan. Grew up in the area, as we talked before. Yeah, we've had a rough couple of years. We're going to turn it around. We got a good draft. It's going to be all right. It's going to be okay. Drake May, good pick up there, and even the kid out of Tennessee who seems like he's got a rocket on him. Like, Patriots going to be okay. We've got a couple of years to dig out of it, but never give up on them. My kids, I've got 22 down to 5. They just grew up in the era where they think we just win all the time. I'm like, you don't understand the pain I've been through my whole life. Whereas the Red Sox or the Patriots are like, listen, this doesn't happen all the time. But we've had a lucky couple decades. Yeah. There's been a lot of overseas deployments that my morale has been lifted to from all the Boston sports teams. So it was pretty funny.
We got spoiled fast.
Yeah.
Well, sir, thanks for coming down into the bunker. Thanks for taking the time out of your schedule.
Is this going to be a new place all the time? Are you going to set up here all the time?
I feel like we got to. I feel like now, I basically work here now. Yeah. The amount of time I spent getting to know the staff over the last few hours.
This is great.
We know they're not going to forget us. So, we got to make this an annual
it's
requirement.
Awesome. So thanks for the opportunity. Thanks for what you're doing for the larger enterprise out there, both past, present, and future. Really appreciate it.
Yes, sir. Well, thank you. Leaders lead from the front, always. And thanks for setting the example.
Thanks, Fran. Appreciate it.
American Jedburghs went on to form the foundation of the United States Special Forces and the Special Activities Directorate of the Central Intelligence Agency. Thanks for listening to the Jedburgh Podcast, an official program of the Green Beret Foundation. I'm your creator and host, Fran Racioppi. Join us next week for a new episode on Apple, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. Check us out on YouTube for full episodes, highlights, and other long and short form content. If you like what you heard, give us a like and leave a review. Follow the Jedburgh Podcast and the Green Beret Foundation on LinkedIn, Instagram, Facebook, X, or Threads. Send your comments and inquiries to fran@jedburghpodcast.com. As former members of Special Operations Forces, the Jedburgh Media Channel and the Green Beret Foundation remain committed to supporting all generations of U.S. Army Special Forces and their families. Thanks for joining us on this episode. How you prepare today determines success tomorrow.